Michael Harris's black grandsons were thrown out of the park he had donated to the city himself. The security guard, unaware of who he was dealing with, made a fatal mistake, and now Michael would make the entire city face the consequences of its bias. The events that follow will stun even the most seasoned of observers. But let's start from the very beginning. James Smith, a white security guard with years of experience, had been working in this park long enough to feel as though he owned it. For him, the rules were absolute, and every visitor seemed to need to understand and abide by them. As usual, he was patrolling the grounds when he noticed two black boys, Justin and Marcus, happily playing by the pond. The moment he saw them, his shoulders tensed. The boys' loud laughter grated on him, and thoughts of order and discipline flooded his mind instantly. With each step he took toward the children, his irritation mounted. When he approached them, he gestured for them to quiet down without wasting any time on pleasantries. "Hey, you two," he began in a harsh tone. "You're not supposed to be playing here. This isn't a place for kids like you." Justin and Marcus stared back at him, confused and unsure what he meant. They hadn't expected this reaction and tried to explain. "Mister, we play here all the time," Justin started, looking into the guard's stern face. "Our grandfather just brought us here last weekend. He told us this park belongs to the city and everyone in it." But James had no intention of listening. His irritation had already turned into open hostility. He assumed the kids were lying or trying to make an excuse to stay. "I don't care what your grandfather told you," he interrupted rudely. "Get out! You're disturbing people and ruining this place." The boys exchanged glances, clearly bewildered and feeling unfairly blamed. They knew they hadn't done anything wrong but understood that arguing was pointless. When James threatened to call the police, they realized it would be better to leave than wait for things to escalate further. Marcus made a final attempt to explain. "But our grandfather said we have every right to be here," he said quietly, feeling the sting of injustice rise in his chest. "Your grandfather lied to you," James snapped. "Now get out before I make you leave." Justin and Marcus walked away in silence, heads down, feeling the bitterness of being treated unfairly. Mrs. Harris listened closely as her grandsons recounted their experience, feeling the injustice boil within her. Justin and Marcus struggled to hold back tears, trying to tell the story calmly, though there was unmistakable hurt in their voices. With each word, Mrs. Harris's face shifted from surprise to anger. Without wasting a moment, she pulled out her phone and called her husband. Michael Harris, an older man with silver hair and a confident bearing, answered the call, a hint of concern in his voice. He could immediately tell that something was wrong. As he listened to the story, he paused for a moment, realizing they were talking about the park he had donated to the city years ago. He was stunned that his own grandchildren had been driven out of a place he had created with the thought of all the city's children in mind, regardless of their skin color. "They're kicking my grandsons out of the park I gave this city?" Michael's voice was firm and resolute. "This is unacceptable. I'm going there immediately." While Michael made his way to the park, Mrs. Harris made a few calls to friends and family, sharing what had happened. One of them, an active social media user, immediately posted about the incident with the hashtags #NowAtOurPark and #Justice for Justin Marcus. The story quickly spread, and soon dozens of residents expressed their support for the boys. The news of discrimination in a public space sparked an outcry. People began sharing the post, tagging city officials, and demanding justice. Meanwhile, local journalists, noticing the growing backlash, hurried to the scene. A crowd gathered near the park, including friends and neighbors of the Harris family, there to support the boys and show that such behavior should not go unpunished. The atmosphere was tense, and James Smith, seeing the crowd and cameras, started to feel anxious. He still didn't understand what was happening or how to react, but something told him the situation was about to take a serious turn. When he saw an elderly man confidently walking toward him, James instinctively sensed this was no ordinary visitor. Michael Harris approached James with a steady stride, and the crowd parted to let him through. The air was thick with tension. Everyone was waiting for an explanation. James felt an unfamiliar fear as he watched this calm yet resolute man, backed by the crowd's support. "Are you the guard of this park?" Michael stopped in front of him, arms crossed. "Yes, sir," James replied, trying to keep his voice steady, though his chest felt tight. "My job is to maintain order, and I was following the rules." "Following the rules?" Michael echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Are you certain that driving away 2 children who were simply playing by the pond is what you call maintaining order?" James, losing confidence, began to stammer. I didn't know who they were, and I was just doing my job." "Those boys are my grandsons," Michael interrupted, his voice calm, but every word resonating firmly. "I donated this land to the city over 30 years ago, so there could be a park where every child could feel safe, regardless of their skin color or background. I never imagined my own grandchildren would be excluded here." Michael's words were like a thunderclap among the onlookers. The crowd murmured, astonished. Many hadn't known the park existed thanks to the generosity of Michael Harris and his family. James paled, unsure of how to respond, desperately searching for an excuse. I didn't mean to offend anyone," he mumbled, feeling cornered. "Your job is to protect this park and ensure the safety of everyone who comes here," Michael said, his gaze unwavering. "No matter their skin color or social status. I donated this land for all the city's residents, not for someone like you to chase kids away for not being the right kind." At this moment, a reporter couldn't resist asking a question, thrusting a microphone toward James. "Did you know the park was donated to the city by Michael Harris?" "No," James replied, realizing how badly he now looked in the crowd's eyes. Following the incident, public outcry continued to grow. Social media erupted with discussions, and local news outlets released reports highlighting the discrimination Michael Harris's grandsons had faced. Outrage among residents intensified, and under public pressure, the security company's management and city officials called an emergency meeting. The local government understood that the situation required not only an apology, but also concrete changes to prevent anything like this from happening again. The meeting was held right in the park. People began gathering long before it started. Not only residents, but also activists, media representatives, and friends of the Harris family. Everyone awaited Michael's statement with a mix of anger, support, and a thirst for justice. When Michael took to the makeshift stage, silence fell over the crowd. He stood tall, exuding a calm dignity. His gaze was firm, but his voice held neither bitterness nor resentment, only a resolve to make a change for the future. "This park is a place for all of us, for our children, for our friends, and for future generations," he began, scanning the audience. "More than 30 years ago, I gifted this land to the city, hoping it would always be a place where everyone could feel safe. But yesterday, I found out that even my own grandchildren can't play here freely because of prejudice and injustice." His words were met with cheers and applause. Michael went on, emphasizing that every person in the city deserves respect and that racial discrimination is unacceptable. The head of the security company, watching with visible unease, took the floor and publicly apologized to Michael and his family. He promised that James would be temporarily suspended and sent to mandatory cultural competence and anti-discrimination training. However, Michael, realizing that simply punishing the guard would not solve the issue, proposed something more meaningful. "I would like to suggest that a memorial be installed in this park, dedicated to unity and equality," he announced. "Let it serve as a reminder that we are all equal here, and that incidents like this should be left in the past." City officials endorsed this idea, and soon a project for the memorial was announced, which would serve as a permanent reminder of the importance of unity and mutual respect. When Michael finished his speech, the crowd erupted in applause. People approached him, thanking him for his determination and for showing that even in moments like these, justice could prevail. Several months later, the memorial was installed in the center of the park. On its granite surface was engraved, "This place is for everyone. There are no outsiders here." Thanks to Michael's efforts, the park became more than just a recreation area. It became a symbol of equality and justice, showing everyone that each of us can contribute to the fight against injustice.